Welcome to Making Memories at Randolph-Macon College. This is Lynda Wright. It's April 14th, 2008. Today we're talking with Dennis Howard and Ira Andrews.
This is Dennis Howard, class of 1972.
And I'm Ira Andrews, class of 1959. So it's really fun. When I received the telephone call from them, or the email one, asking about having a conversation with you, I was so excited because I hadn't seen you for some time, Dennis, and I do have some memories that I hope that are back in this memory bank here. But I really look forward to seeing you and having a conversation with you again. And I wonder if part of this is to remind me, how did Randolph-Macon get on your radar screen?
Excuse me. I was recruited by former coach Paul Webb. Coach Paul Webb came to Washington Lee High School in I think it was the winter of 67, 68. And at that time, he met with my high school coach, Morris Levin, from Washington Lee High School. And Morris Levin had a policy where he wouldn't let anyone talk to the players until after the season. But he came up and talked to Morris Levin, and later on after the season, Coach Paul Webb talked to me.
So it was Paul. I saw Paul, by the way, on April Fool's Day.
April Fool's Day.
Yeah, April the 1. A bunch of guys in my high school, Petersburg High School.
You went to Petersburg?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know
that. Yeah, Moses Malone School.
Okay.
Petersburg High School. There's a Randolph-Macon graduate who is really instrumental in putting together an organization called POGOs, Petersburg Old Geezers organization.
Petersburg Old Geezers.
And we get together 3 or 4 times a year for lunch, and there are more than 200 people there. So Paul Webb comes up to those things, to those luncheons.
I saw him about a year or so ago. I think the gym was dedicated to he and Coach Nunley.
Nunley, yeah.
And I saw him, I saw his wife and several of his children.
Yeah.
So we had an opportunity to do a little fraternization there.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Now, did you play for 4 years with him?
I played for 3.5 years. My freshman year, I had made the starting team and was playing, and I'll never forget, a redhead guy from Georgetown Prep, I think it was, Georgetown Prep, undercut me when I was going up for a layup, and I broke my right wrist. And I was out for about 8 weeks and came back and ended up playing a few games with the junior varsity, and then they moved me up to varsity for the tournament. And I remember they were playing the University of Baltimore, and Darrell Morris was a senior at the time, and Charlie Weston was a junior. And they were something like 20 points down. And I guess the coach said, well, what the heck? We might as well see what we got for next year. And he put me in, not knowing what he would get. And I ended up scoring 9 points, and they came back. I think they lost by 2 or 3 points. And so I remember crying in the locker room because we had lost. And rookie Darrell Morris said, well, why are you crying? We were out of it until you came in.
We wouldn't have had a ghost of a chance.
So I felt better. And then for the next 3 years, I started. And when people talk about basketball, they usually forget that I was recruited for defense. And Jimmy Phelps, who was a year ahead of me from Newport News, Virginia, I think he played at Hampton High School, he and I were a defensive tandem for 2 years.
Rufak Chadi. Who else was in the department then? I didn't look at a catalog.
I remember Mr. Jordan.
Oh, yeah,
Mr.
of course.
Jordan,
yeah.
And the MUFAC Chad.
Yeah,
Those are the two I remember.
Yeah, Bob Jordan. He lives in Hanover, lives in Ashland. He and his wife Pat.
Okay.
Jordan. Yeah, my kids and their kids went to school together.
Right.
Bob Jordan.
I can remember at Randolph-Macon a radical transformation of the student body. And it went from being very conservative and very resistant to change my freshman year, where I, in many of my classes, because I had a black militant value system with heroes that included Huey Newton, Bobby Seals, Angela Davis, H. Rat Brown, there's a congressman that said, "Burn, baby, burn," that who I'm blocking on, that used to be chairman of some committee, went down to Bamini or something like that, and they stripped him of his chairmanship. I can't think of his name. But those were my heroes.
From New York?
From New York.
Adam Clayton Powell.
Adam Clayton Powell, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Adam Clayton
Yeah.
Powell. He was
Abyssinian Baptist Church.
Right. He was a hero of mine. And when I was in the student government office, those posters were plastered all over my student government office. And at that time, with all the assassinations that were going on in the larger society, there was a lot of racial tension. And I would end up going into a sociology class or a religion class with Professor Edwards, and many times I would have to defend my values by myself. And I would put my back to the wall, and the whole class would take shots at me. And earlier on, I thought there was some resistance from the faculty as well, because I thought that they expected less from a black student, and I thought that the grades reflected that. And I can remember when Miller Davis from Smithville, Virginia, and I were sociology majors, and we took several courses together. And I used to tutor Miller Davis. And Miller Davis was a white student whose dad owned a lumber company. And he was just basically coming to get a degree to inherit the lumber company and say he had a credential, he was an educated man. For me, I was trying to do it all with a degree that opened a lot of doors. And so I was tutoring Miller Davis. And when the grades came out, Miller got a B and I got a C. So I said, "Miller, go get all your exams and bring them here." So Miller did, and I got mine, and I went and copied them. And I caught Dean Mabry. He was what, dean of the college at the time?
Yeah.
He was dean of the college.
William Alexander Mabry.
And I caught him on the way into Peel Hall one morning. I said, "Dean Mabry, I think a little racial discrimination going on here." And of course, that got his attention, right? He said, "Well, what are you talking about?" So I gave him about 4 or 5 exams. And on the objective part of the exams, I had maybe 50, 75 points more than what Miller Davis had in terms of the objective score.
Yeah.
But now, on the subjective part of it, he had maybe twice that many points than what I did. And so I had gave supporting information to support my position. And I told Dr. Mabry, I said, "Well, okay, now I'm a black student here." I said, "You can't expect me to think white." I said, "These are my heroes, and I have a good position here." And I said, "They're just not accepting my position." So I heard later on that he had went to a faculty meeting, and he had presented that same position. And from that point on,
Things changed. And my grades improved. It didn't improve that much in math. But in everything else, my grades improved. From my senior year on in, they improved a lot. And I can remember when I was a senior, we had a weak basketball team when I was a senior because
2 or 3 recruits that were freshmen for whatever reasons. These guys were good for maybe, they could combine for 50 points between the 2 of them, right? One guy had personal problems with the school and something about an academic issue. He had to leave. He transferred to the University of Maryland. The other guy was redshirted. And about that time, Newsweek magazine came out with a report saying that black athletes were being exploited by the schools and that a large percentage of black athletes were not graduating. And so there I was sitting there with a C average and needing to pick up a math course for distribution reasons to graduate. And I also needed to do a senior project to graduate because I didn't have enough distribution points. So Coach Paul Webb called me in, and he was saying that because I was the outstanding senior forward and the captain of the team, I would need to step up and really be a super athlete to carry the team. But he was basically asking the impossible because at that point I was already the defensive stopper. I was averaging about 12, 13 points a game, close to double rebounds, and I had 5 or 6 assists a game. And so my mother's voice came back to me. Don't play, bring home the degree. So rather than get 120% that I had given in the previous 3 years, I could only give 100%. And I went ahead and worked and had everything going well, except for I got a Dr. Peace.
Peace.
Dr. Peace, who
Math.
who was one of the most difficult math teachers at Randolph-Macon College. And I always wondered whether or not they had planned to give me Dr. Peace, right? Because there was, you had students got to know faculty just like faculty got to know students. And we know who the conservative ones were and who liberal and moderate ones were. And Dr. Peace wasn't somebody that I wanted to be assigned to. So I tried to change, couldn't change. And so with Dr. Peace, I think he ended up, my senior year, second semester, he ended up passing maybe 3 or 4 students in that particular class. And I flunked, I got like a D and D minus F, or something like it. He only gave 2 or 3 grades. And so I went to Professor Mufak Chadi. And I almost had tears in my eyes, and I said, look here, I passed the senior project on black-white miscegenation in the United States. I passed, I think I got a B in there, and I passed all the other courses, and I was doing quite well, but I had failed the math course, and I was wondering how I would get the money to come back to Randolph-Macon to make up the difference. And I didn't have any understanding of what the logistics of it was. And he said, Howard, you don't have a problem. Go to VCU and go to the math department and take this course on finite math and just apply yourself and come back and graduate next year.
Transfer that course in.
And so when I got home, I passed the finite math course. I think I ended up getting a C plus on it. I got a B, C, D. It told out to be a C, C plus. So when I got home, I had 3 letters from the draft board, and I put them in chronological order. The first one said, you have been selected for, you are such and such an age, you are to report to the Arlington County Selective Service Board for a physical. And I hadn't got the letter because it went to my mother in Arlington. I was in Richmond for summer school. The second one said the same thing with the additional comment saying that you have failed the first one, report for the second one. So the third letter I got said you are hereby drafted to the United States Army, report to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, October, whatever it was. And by the time I got home from summer school, I had maybe 6 weeks before I was to go into the United States Army. Went down to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and when it was time to graduate, I asked my company commander for leave, and he wanted to know what it was about. And I told him, well, I'm trying to graduate from college. And he said, well, of course you can go for that. That's once in a lifetime. You don't want to miss that. So I came in, and I've got some pictures in the book there of really is about 8 or 9 family members that came down, include my grandmother, my aunt, my mother, my former brother-in-law, my sister, and several church members. And really that was a big showing of support. I didn't appreciate it at the time, but it was to have 3 generations there. You know, it was a big showing of support. And then I can remember that former President Luther Wright gave out the degrees. And I think it was the registrar, Mr. Hopkins, was the one who sorted out.
Yeah, he handed the tubes. And
handed the tubes to President White, and Mr. Hopkins and I didn't. There was a little friction there. For whatever reason, we never said anything to each other. But I got the feeling that he didn't like me, and I'm sure he got the same from me. So when it came time to get my degree, I got my degree from President White, and I made a special stop for Mr. Hopkins and shook his hand and hugged him. And he turned purple. You know, it was my way of saying, hey, you know, I completed the course.
I fought the fight.
And that was about it. You talked about mentors on your list here. I think, well, I don't think I know. I always thought that my strongest mentors at the college were Dean Andrews, Professor Mufak Chatty, Professor Longacre in the art department, Professor Edwards in the religion department, Coach Paul Webb, and I have to say behind the scenes, I think President Luther White did a lot. He put me on the President's Student Life Council or something like that. It was a committee that advised him, and I was there with the editor of the Yellow Jacket newspaper and one of the senior members of the Judicial Council and one other woman that was on the Judicial Council. And it gave us access to the president of the college. And when you look back at it, you have to appreciate anytime you have that kind of access to power and you have the ability to make recommendations. It's a very special opportunity. Favorite courses? I enjoyed sociology, and I enjoyed the religion. One guy I omitted that I can't omit, Chaplain William Gibson.
Bill Gibson.
Yeah, we called him Bill Gibson. He was my faculty advisor for my sophomore year, and he called me in to his office. I think his office was in the old Chaplain then.
That's right.
And he called me over. I didn't know what he wanted. He said, well, Dennis, you've been here a year. It's time to sort out what you're going to do, with your life, with your career. What are you going to do? You just can't keep going to school forever. And that was the farthest thing from my mind. I had went to school, allegedly to do something with art education or art history. You really couldn't do anything but be maybe an artist and have rich patrons or maybe to teach art in school. But he said, well, what do you want to do? And I'll always remember this. I said, well, I don't know what I want to do. He said, well, what do you think you want to do? I said, well, I don't know. I want to help people. And he stopped and he paused and he looked at me. He said, oh, that's so good. That's great. would you like to be a minister? And I said, well, chaplain, I don't play with God. I'm really not that straight. I can't. I can't walk the line that straight. So he said, well, what about psychiatry, psychology? And he went on down the line, psychiatry, psychology, and then he went to sociology. And in each of the subjects that he mentioned, each one of the terminal degrees he mentioned, I asked him what was the terminal degree and how much money would it cost. And he said psychiatry and psychology required PhDs. And they got to sociology and said, well, you probably will need a social work degree. And they will probably require you to be licensed in the future, but right now you just need a master's degree. So based on the money and the gut feeling, I said, well, if I can work with people and I only have to be required to get a master's degree, I think I want to go with sociology, social work. And later on, when I got to the military, there was a Howard alumnus there, Jerry Langley, she was a supervisor of social work services in the drug center where I ended up working for the Army. And she told me that she could get me into Howard University with a recommendation. She said, you've got a beautiful gift for gab. You love working with people. I was doing group therapy with co-alcoholic females and individual soldiers coming back from Vietnam with drug habits. And so she wrote to Howard University School of Social Work.
Yeah.
And she got me an interview with them. And the long shot of the interview was that I was going to start 6 to 8 weeks behind my class once I got out of the military in October. And they wanted to know whether or not I could catch up. And they talked to me, and I talked to several of the faculty members, and they said, this guy's sharp. We think he can. And I think having gone to Randolph-Macon and the other schools I had gone to and coming from the community I had a good, solid foundation so that when I hit the ground, I did catch up.
Yeah, great.
And so that was a pivotal recommendation and a pivotal placement in my career. And I'm now at the point of retiring from the military and from civil services after 35 years in one and 21 years in another with a license in social work. And I really work with tens of thousands of people, and I really enjoy doing it.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun, Dennis, and it's fun hearing about how your career has blossomed, and I'm sure that lots of people have benefited by not only your prodding, but your insight into life. And to think that Randolph-Macon had a little bit to do with that is really gratifying.
Randolph-Macon had a lot to do with it because actually when you think about the fact that it is a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant-dominated culture, and Randolph-Macon was my first full-time 724 experience with that culture, it got me off at a young age on a good foundation, and that was very helpful.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt you. I remember getting a ticket or two. I remember the first ticket I got, I went to Arlington County for going 10 miles over the speed limit, my first ticket, and the judge in Arlington County asked what did I do, and I said, well, I'm a student. And he said, where you go to school? I said, Randolph-Macon, and the judge
did a double take, huh?
He did a double take. He had to be thinking, how does this black guy go to Randolph-Macon? That's not what I recall, right? So it didn't hurt me in any way. It opened a lot of doors for me going to Randolph-Macon.
Yeah, that's great. That is great.
Thank you so much for sharing your memories, Dennis Howard, and thank you, Ira Andrews, for being with us today.